will launch an inquiry into the causes behind the Grenfell fire disaster after it says its request to become a core participant in the public inquiry was turned down. The Watchdog's independent review will look at possible failures by the local council and central government to provide safe housing conditions. 71 people died in the blaze in June. There has been criticism that the public inquiry, which Theresa May announced weeks after the disaster, would be too narrow in its remit and that key questions could be neglected. Well, with me now is the chair of the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, David Isaac. So what are you going to be looking at that you think the official inquiry won't?
We think the inquiry is important in terms of its remit, but it doesn't take into account the issues of human rights and equalities, and we think those are really important aspects which should be considered in relation to the whole of the tragedy that is Grenfell.
So what rights are you looking at?
We're looking, obviously, at the right to life. We're looking at inhumane and degrading treatment, and we're also looking at the right to adequate housing. We'll be looking at equalities issues as well in relation to a whole variety of equalities issues which are going to be appropriate in relation to race issues and disability and also young children.
And why do you think those things won't necessarily be covered?
Well, we actually applied to be a party to the official inquiry, as you said in your introduction, and we were unsuccessful in that application. And because of the serious concerns that we think are raised because of international human rights obligations, we would like those to be taken into account. We will review independently, as you've indicated, what those human rights obligations are. We'll be taking evidence and also looking at the evidence that's presented to the official inquiry, and we'll be making our recommendations by April.
I mean, it's hard not to see what you're doing as implicitly undermining of the official inquiry.
Well, it's not our intention to undermine the official inquiry. As I said, we respect the inquiry. We wanted to be part of it, but because we're concerned that the inquiry may not focus on human rights and equalities issues, that this is really important, and we will present this information once we make our recommendations to the inquiry and hope that they will listen.
But if you don't have any sort of statutory powers or status in terms of your inquiry, the council and the government could just say, we're not going to cooperate, couldn't they?
They could. We are the country's statutory body that actually promotes equalities and protects human rights, and we think that it's completely consistent with our role to present the human rights and equalities approach to these sorts of issues. This won't be an official inquiry or investigation using the Commission's statutory powers. It will be an informal review, but nevertheless an important one which we would like people to listen to.
Obviously, huge numbers of people who lived in Grenfell Tower, and many of the dead, came from ethnic minority backgrounds or refugee backgrounds, or, you know, to what extent do you fear that they were being discriminated against in the way they were dealt with by the council? I mean, is that what you're looking at?
Well, it's one of the things, as I say, that we will look at. It would be premature of me to say that there has been discrimination. What we are keen to do is to listen to the evidence that's presented to the inquiry.
But what's brought you to this place? I mean, have people been coming to you saying there was discrimination, that's why you need to look into
this? We fear that there
or
might well have been discrimination and some unlawful acts. We can't say yet whether that's the case. We have had people who have made representations to us, and that led us to make an application, as I say, to be part of the official inquiry.
I mean, when you say unlawful acts, what do you mean, and what kind of sanction could there be if an official body has broken human rights law?
Well, equalities law in relation to unlawful acts, but one of the things I'm really keen to do is to ensure that we look at our international human rights obligations. It's International Human Rights Day, by the way, and it's particularly appropriate that we look at things through that human rights lens and consider whether or not domestic law is consistent with those human rights obligations on an international level, but also to look at how that might actually have an impact in relation to how we go forward and the way in which we protect people who live in public housing.
David Isaacs, thank you very much.
Thank you.